So when I talk about sensory seeking, so these are the kids whose brains are under registering sensory information. So for them to perceive sensory information and make sense of it and organize it, it needs to be almost greater doses of it. And so a child who wants a firm touch has a very hard time keeping their hands to themselves. So they'll hug their peers, they'll hug the teacher, but it might be a sign of sensory needs. And sometimes will like drag their arms on the walls as they're walking or their entire body because they're constantly craving that sensory input.
I think of this, we got a new van and it has this feature where whenever you're like, I'm going to put this in quotes, close to something, it will start like beeping, right? So like I'm backing out of my driveway and I have my recycle bin at the end of my driveway and it's like beep, 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 beep as I get closer to it. Like it's impossible to tailgate in this van because as you get closer, it slows you down. And I think of this with the sensory seeking, especially proprioceptive seeking, of that sensor inside of their bodies is going off at different points, right? So for my sensory sensitive son who does not have high proprioceptive seeking needs, when somebody comes into his space bubble's pretty big. So his like beep, 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 you're getting close to me starts to go off much before my daughter's. My daughter loves like a deep pressure, deep squeeze, deep snuggle. And her beep, 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 beep sensor of you're getting too close to me doesn't go off until there's quite a bit of pressure. Whereas his goes off before you're even touching him really. And looking at that for our sensory seekers, for folks who are tuning in and are like, okay, I feel like I'm starting to get this. It can present as a behavior challenge. Sometimes the sensory seeker might go and they go to sit next to somebody and they sit on them. Or they do sit really close and they snuggle up. In fact, our really good friends have a daughter that's a month older than Sage, and they are a sensory mismatch where she is proprioceptive seeking and there's a bench at their dining room table that the kids will often sit at. And we have to put an adult between them because she wants to just slide closer and closer and closer to Sage. And Sage is like, get away. My nervous system's beeping. And hers is like, we're not touching enough. And so really looking at when we step back and we watch how kids move through the world, that sensor is to let them know where their body is in relationship to other things. So the kid whose arm is dragging on the wall at school, it's not to just like be annoying and drag their shirt on the wall and get it dirty or, you know, rip off papers with their shoulder as they go, but rather to let their body know where it is in space, where their body ends and something else begins.
Right.
And we all have different kind of sensor thresholds.
Right. And I always tell teachers too that I feel like that part, knowing if a child has sensory issues, I feel like it's probably the more obvious part because a child who is seeking a lot of movement, they will have such a hard time sitting still. They're kicking their legs. They're really fidgety. They're constantly moving up. A child who's craving oral input puts everything in their mouth. Their markers are in their mouth. Their erasers are in their mouth. On the flip side, a child who's very sensitive will cover their ears to auditory sensitivities, will have a meltdown when they taste something and the texture is just, aversive to them. And so I feel like that part, kids are pretty good at showing where they're having the sensory challenges.
If
And
we are
so,
listening.
Yes.